Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're plunging into ancient Greece, looking at the Olympian goddess Demeter.
That's right. Series to the Romans.
Exactly. And when you think Demeter, you probably picture, fields of grain, harvest time.
Agriculture, yeah. The basics.
But there's so much more going on there, isn't there? We've found some really interesting layers to explore.
Oh, definitely. We've pulled together some great stuff for this. We're looking at Theoi Project, brilliant for the mythology details, and the World History Encyclopedia for that historical background on her worship.
Mhm.
And we even found some perspectives from an Ancient Grandeur script that really push beyond just the harvest goddess idea.
Yeah, that's the plan today. Not just, repeating the common knowledge. We want to get into the deeper meaning of Demeter. Her family always complicated the big myths, and crucially, how she impacted ancient religion, their ideas about life, death, the whole cycle.
Okay, let's get started then.
Right. So her core domains first.
Yeah, absolutely. First and foremost, she is the goddess of agriculture. Fertility. I mean, that's fundamental. Growing crops, sustaining life.
Can't get much more essential than that.
No. And you often see her shown with a cornucopia, overflowing, or just holding a sheaf of wheat. Simple but powerful symbols of what she provided. The foundation for everything, really.
But it's interesting, our sources also link her to sacred law and marriage. That feels like a bit of a jump from farming.
It does, but it seems deeply tied to her grief over Persephone. That intense mother-daughter bond, that pain. It seems like it somehow became associated with protecting families, the marriage bond itself.
Huh. Can you unpack that a bit more? How does that personal grief translate to protecting families generally?
Well, the thinking seems to be that the stability of the family was seen as vital, much like the earth reliably producing food. Demeter's fierce, almost desperate protection of her daughter set a kind of divine example.
Oh, okay.
Her suffering really highlighted how important those bonds were, so she became a sort of guarantor for them.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
A deity's personal story shaping social values.
Okay, and then there's a really big one, the Eleusinian Mysteries.
Yes, definitely one of her most significant roles. These weren't just, standard rituals. They were tied into the whole cycle, life, death, rebirth.
The sources say she revealed secrets about the afterlife, offered hope.
Exactly. A spiritual path. The OA project specifically mentions initiates being promised a blessed afterlife in Elysium. It went way beyond just earthly concerns.
So what exactly was a mystery cult like that? How did it work?
Well, mystery cults were all about secret rituals. Initiates went through specific ceremonies. They were shown things, told things, all aimed at a profound personal spiritual experience. Unlike the big public festivals, this was focused on the individual's journey, especially concerning what happens after death based on Demeter's revelations. Highly secretive, only for the initiated.
Wow. That promise of a better afterlife, you can see why that would be incredibly powerful for people.
And she wasn't always nurturing, was she? There's this aspect of authority over oaths, justice related to the earth.
Right. Oaths sworn by Demeter's name were considered ironclad, unbreakable. It shows her power over the land's integrity and the sort of moral duties connected to it.
So respect the earth or else?
Pretty much. Her anger towards people who violated sacred land or groves was said to be, well, terrifying. A fierce protector in that sense, too.
Definitely not just a gentle harvest mother, then.
Okay, let's switch gears a bit. The family tree. Always a highlight with the Olympians.
Oh, yes, always complex. So her parents were Titans, Kronos and Rhea.
Right.
Which makes her siblings Hestia, Hera, Hades, Poseidon, and Zeus, of course, the major players.
Quite the lineup. Must have made for intense family dinners. And her own children, they have stories, too.
They certainly do. With Zeus, she had Persephone, the absolute center of our main story, and also Iacchus, who sometimes gets linked with Dionysus.
The wine god. Interesting connection. Yeah. And then with Immortal, Aegean, she had Plutus, the god of wealth. Although, Zeus wasn't too happy about that.
Oh.
World History Encyclopedia mentions Zeus struck Aegean down with a thunderbolt. Jealousy, it seems.
Yikes. Intense. And wasn't there a strange story with Poseidon as well? Something about horses.
Yes, that's a wild one. Demeter apparently turned herself into a mare to escape Poseidon's advances.
Didn't work, though.
No, he turned himself into a stallion. Their children were Despona, a nymph or goddess, and the incredible horse Arion, winged sometimes, ridden by heroes like Heracles later on. It really shows the power plays and volatile relationships among the gods.
Even trying to escape didn't work. Wow.
Yeah.
And she had connections to mortals, too, beyond Asia.
Oh, yes, very important ones. Her adopting or fostering Demophon, or sometimes it's Triptolemus, the son of King Callias of
Right,
Lucis.
the king who took her in when she was grieving.
That's the one. As thanks, she tried to make the boy immortal. But more importantly for humanity, she gave him the plow and taught him agriculture, spread the knowledge.
So she directly gifted farming techniques to humans through him. A very nurturing role there.
Exactly, a direct investment in human progress.
Okay, that takes us right into the key myths. And obviously we have to start with Persephone's abduction.
The big one, absolutely central to understanding Demeter and her worship. The sources give loads of possible locations for where it happened. Sicily is a big contender, places like Enna, Mount Etna, but also near Eleusis itself, other spots in Greece, even maybe an island in the Atlantic. It varies.
Interesting that it's not really in the earliest texts, like the Iliad or Odyssey.
Right, Theoi Project points that out. It suggests the myth really grew in importance later on.
Any idea why it became so central later? Maybe changes in society.
That's a really good question. You could argue that as societies became more reliant on settled agriculture, a goddess tied so closely to the earth's fertility naturally gained prominence. And also the themes in the myth, life, death, rebirth, loss. These are universal human concerns. Maybe as Greek philosophy started grappling more with the afterlife, this story just resonated more deeply.
That rings true. But the core of it is just raw Greece, isn't it?
Yeah.
Demeter searching for 9 days, refusing to eat or drink.
Total despair. She wanders, torch in hand, refusing nectar and ambrosia. It's only when she meets Hecate, and then Helios, the sun god, tells her the truth.
Which is?
That Hades took Persephone to the underworld. And worse, Zeus allowed it. Her own brother.
Devastating.
Yeah.
And her reaction, she doesn't just, complain to Zeus.
No, she withdraws, leaves Olympus, lives among mortals disguised as an old woman, and in her grief she stops the crops from growing. Everywhere, a global famine.
Wow. The World History Encyclopedia really stresses how that directly showed Persephone's connection to growth even when she was gone.
Exactly. The famine got so bad nothing grew, humans were starving, it forced Zeus to act.
He had to step in.
He sent Iris, the messenger goddess, then all the other gods, one by one, to try and persuade Demeter. But she wouldn't budge. Not until Persephone was returned. It shows her power, but also just that fierce maternal love.
Unshakable. So Zeus finally sends Hermes down to Hades.
Yes, to fetch Persephone. But there's always a catch in these myths.
The pomegranate seed.
The pomegranate seed. Hades gives her one or a few, depending on the version, to eat before she leaves.
And eating food from the underworld binds you to it.
That's the rule. So a compromise had to be struck. Persephone would spend part of the year above ground with Demeter's spring and summer when things grow.
Right.
And the other part, autumn and winter, back in the underworld with Hades, when the earth lies dormant.
And that's the mythological origin of the seasons. Life, death, return.
Precisely. It's not just weather, it's a metaphor for sowing seeds, their burial, and then their rebirth. Life from death. It mirrors so much of the human condition, joy and sorrow, the cyclical nature of existence.
A really beautiful and enduring story.
Definitely. And beyond Persephone, there's the Demeter story we touched on. Nursing the king's son, trying to make him immortal in the fire.
Getting interrupted by the terrified mother.
Right. Which leads to her revealing herself in divine glory and demanding they build her a temple at Eleusis. That's the origin story for her main sanctuary.
Got it. And Triptolemus, again, him being sent out to teach farming. A very positive contribution.
Yes, very much the provider there. But then you also have the darker side, like the story of Erysichthon.
What happened to him?
He arrogantly cut down trees in Demeter's sacred grove. Her punishment, she cursed him with insatiable hunger. He ate everything he owned, eventually, supposedly, even himself.
Oof. A stark warning. Don't mess with Demeter's sacred places.
Exactly. A reminder of her power and the need for respect for nature under her watch.
So given all these powerful stories, her worship must have been huge.
Oh, massive. Eleusis was the main center, obviously, home of the Eleusinian Mysteries. We talked about the secrecy.
And the promise of a better afterlife.
Yes, hugely appealing. World History Encyclopedia mentions the lesser mysteries in spring and the big greater mysteries in autumn.
And it wasn't just Eleusis.
No, it spread widely across Greece, Crete, Delos, Attica, loads of places, and into Asia Minor, Sicily, Italy. The Romans adopted her as Ceres, as we said.
Right.
Theoi Project and World History list many sites. And that weird statue mentioned at Figaleia, in a cave, with a horse's head.
Yeah, what was that about?
Probably links back to that myth with Poseidon, her transforming into a mare. A very specific local interpretation.
Fascinating how these stories echo in local worship. What about festivals for her?
Several important ones. The Thesmophoria was a big one, women only, held in autumn in Attica, all about promoting fertility.
That's the one with the pigs.
Yes. The World History Encyclopedia mentions piglets being thrown into pits, believe it or not. Symbols of fertility, presumably. Aristophanes even wrote a comedy about it, Thesmophoria's Osea.
Huh. Okay.
There were the Eleusinian Games at Eleusis itself, twice a year. Prizes were sacred grain. And the Haloa, a winter festival, mostly women again, often linked with Dionysus. Plus others like the Calamia, Prorosia, all tied to the farming calendar, ensuring good harvests.
Seems like pigs were common sacrifices for her.
Pigs, yes, symbolizing fertility. Also bulls, cows, honey cakes, fruits, things from the earth reflecting her domain.
Makes sense. How do they usually show her in art or describe her in writing?
Visually, the depictions are fairly consistent. A mature woman, regal, often crowned, holding wheat or that cornucopia, and very often a torch remembering her search for Persephone.
That image is very clear. What about in literature?
The descriptions tend to be quite evocative, though brief. Homer calls her golden-haired. Hesiod uses terms like bounteous, well-garlanded, hallowed, reverend.
Nice descriptions.
When she's mourning, she's often veiled, wearing a dark cloak. But the Homeric hymn to Demeter has that amazing scene where she reveals her true form to Metanera, changing size, radiating beauty, and this divine fragrance.
So she could appear ordinary, then suddenly, bam, divine power.
Exactly. A truly awe-inspiring moment. The Theoi Project does say she wasn't depicted visually that often before the 6th century BCE. Later, in archaic and classical art, she's frequently shown seated with Persephone.
A mother-daughter portrait.
Yeah. Key attributes are the grain crown, torch, scepter, maybe a poppy, stalks of grain. And then later, lots of Greco-Roman statues clearly labeled Demeter series.
Okay, so we've covered a lot: her powers, family, myths, worship, art. What are the deeper takeaways here? The philosophical insights?
Well, the Ancient Grandeur script offers some good points. Demeter really embodies our utter dependence on nature cycles, on environmental balance.
Our reliance on the earth.
Fundamentally, her story is a constant reminder to respect those natural rhythms for our own survival.
In the grief aspect. The mysteries.
That speaks directly to the human experience of loss, doesn't it? And that deep-seated need to find meaning beyond death. The mysteries offered a path towards that, a hope for renewal even after profound sorrow.
And her bond with Persephone? What does that tell us?
I think it highlights the incredible power of maternal love, of family bonds. Demeter's grief literally changes the world. Her determination shows how fundamental those connections are, powerful enough to challenge the divine order itself.
So what are the lasting lessons from Demeter's story for us, maybe?
I think it boils down to understanding sustenance, not just physical, but maybe spiritual too. A resilience getting through the hard times, the winters, and that promise of renewal. Life is fragile, loss happens, but her story always cycles back to rebirth. Even in the dark earth, the seeds for the future are there.
So wrapping up, Demeter is way more than just the harvest. She's tied into cosmic cycles, spiritual quests, the foundations of civilization, and just incredibly human emotions like grief and hope.
Exactly. Which brings us to a final thought for you listening. Think about how this ancient goddess, who represented both life-giving abundance and devastating loss, mirrors our own complicated feelings about nature, about life, death, renewal. Do these ancient mysteries, focused on where our food comes from and what happens after we die, still echo in how we think about those big questions today?
Something definitely worth pondering. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you.